Was the Mondial the only Ferrari that had the headlights go up and down? Or were there other ones?
That's so Justin, just to be straight, like, do you have any previous background on Ferrari Mondials?
I don't, but James has lied to me my entire life by telling me that any car that's red is a Ferrari. I do think it's beautiful looking, Mike. It actually reminds me of like that opening scene of The Wolf of Wall Street.
Well, actually, it's a fair comment, right? Because there's a lot of design cues that this car shared with the Testarossa, including the cheese-style grates on the side of the car.
Okay.
Yeah, like you could slice cheese with these things.
Yeah.
That's how they got that nickname.
I think it's really nice. I do think this almost kind of reminds me of like a Tesla door handle. I don't know if you agree or not.
I've never really thought about how this car relates to a Tesla, but now that you said that, I can't really unsee it.
But kind of like, you know, like a Tesla, you got to open it up like that. It's kind of...
Right, but I feel like the Tesla, like you would just walk up to it and it would automatically extend, whereas this one never really lies flush and you still got to pull it out.
Okay, good point.
So it's a little bit more of a handshake than you would get with a Tesla.
Yeah, okay.
But so nothing beyond that about Mondials?
No, besides that, I have no preconception. If I saw this thing going down the highway, I'd be like, that's really cool.
All right. I love
your
it.
opinion.
I love it. Well, obviously I'm biased because I've owned this car since 2015. So there's a reason why I've held on to it for 10 years.
Okay.
And but I do want to pick up on what Chris said. What was the comment? Yes, the guy thought that maybe they got a reputation of people thought they were cooler than they actually were.
Well, he actually thought they were very, very cool and didn't realize that they were sort of the joke of the butt of the joke for Ferraris.
Right.
And why are they the butt of the joke for Ferraris? Is it?
So it's a really fair comment, because when you got to go all the way back to the 1970s, and Ferrari was making, you know, the Dino 246, the 308 GT4. These were like the pinnacle of mid-engine cars, and they weren't strangled with any emissions controls or anything else. And they were just great cars to drive, and the markets recognized that. Like, look at the values of these things. Well, not 308 GT4s, but certainly Dino 246s. And then the Mondial was the successor to the 308 GT4. And it was the first Ferrari in North America that got catalytic converters, oxygen sensors, fuel injection.
Oh, wow.
And it sounds great, but it really wasn't. It kind of strangled the motor. And so when it was launched in 1980, it only had like 200 horsepower. The press got a hold of the cars, and in comparison to the 308 GT4, it just positively, it fell on its face.
And why did they start putting all of this emission stuff on it? Was it the Environmental Protection Agency saying, hey, you got to do better, car companies, or what?
Yeah, CAFE was pressing down on car companies big time.
Okay.
And it was just like the 1970s and 80s was an awkward time for car makers.
Gotcha.
So they were trying to figure all that shit out still. Ferrari largely ignored it in the 70s and just said, we're not doing it.
Yeah.
But then the Mondial came out in 1980 and they didn't have a choice. And they didn't really quite have it figured out, because the weight of that car was more than the 308 GT4. The motor wasn't making as much power. And so, people were driving these things saying it wasn't really delivering on the full Ferrari experience. And I think Car and Driver drove one, and the 0 to 60 time was in the 9-second range.
Oh, wow.
Which is a little bit embarrassing.
So how many Mondials have they made that are out in production? What does that look like?
They made a lot of these cars. I mean, this was kind of the volume seller for Ferrari. Okay. But the interesting thing about the Mondial is that they didn't just rest on their laurels. Like, the Mondial 8 came out in 1980. Then they brought out the Quattrovalva. So that had the 4-valve heads on this motor. Horsepower went up a solid 30, 40 horses.
Okay.
Car was, very, very much improved over the first one. Then they went to the 3.2. The 3.2 is the same motor that the Magnum PI Ferrari 328 got, which everybody loves.
Yeah.
And then, this is crazy, Ferrari went to the trouble of re-engineering the entire car just to stick in an entirely different engine and transmission.
Huh. Should we go take a look at the engine now?
Let's do it.
I did learn that the engine is in the back of the Ferrari, similar to the Porsche.
So previous Mondials, if you really want to get geeky here, the motor was turned sideways. And it was a transverse mounted motor for the last iteration of the Mondial T, which this one is. It's a Mondial T Coupe. By the way, it was a 1-year only car for North America. Only 43 of them were imported here.
Wow.
So a very rare car. They turned the motor around, so it's longitudinal. The transmission is slung out behind it. It's the same layout that you still have in F1 cars today. And I mean, can you imagine, like they did all this just to make 43 of these cars for 1 year.
Wow.
Crazy, right? But that's what Ferrari did. And many people don't even know that this version of the Mondial exists. So, you know, beyond the fact that the motor was completely turned around and re-engineered, center of gravity in this car versus previous Mondials, it's 6.5 inches lower. This car has ABS brakes. It was the first Ferrari to get adjustable shock absorbers. So there's a little toggle switch in the center console. And I mean, you can go full on hard and it feels rock hard. Or you can go soft and it feels kind of floaty, like your town car actually.
Yeah.
Maybe not quite as floaty, but it is pretty floaty.
Yeah.
Hopefully today we're gonna prove that the Mondial is not as horrible as people think it is for a Ferrari.
What's your favorite thing about the car? You've obviously owned it for a couple of years.
Favorite thing? It's telling people that this is not the Magnum PI Ferrari. Because you go down the road, everybody thinks that's what it is.
Yeah.
It's funny how people really can't distinguish between the two. But if you look from the side, the most obvious difference is the fact that this car has a much longer wheelbase than the 328, 308s. And the reason why is because the Mondial is actually a 4-seater. So this car actually has rear seats in it with the engine behind it. Rear seats aren't huge, but you actually could squeeze back there for a short trip.
For sure.
And that made this the practical Ferrari, which is something that no other mid-engine Ferrari could ever claim.
I love it. It's definitely a family car. That's the thing.
If I had a family, they would definitely be riding in this.
Right here. I love it.
Yeah. What are your qualms with this car?
There's one.
What is that?
It's too low, Mike. I've had the privilege of driving this car a few times, actually once with 3 people in it, and I must say it is one of the lowest cars I've ever driven, and it high centers like nobody's business.
I don't disagree with you. It beaches itself way too easily.
And maybe it's because they just had to have an extra set of seats in the back, which I'm sure was for some sort of insurance purposes and all that nonsense.
No, it's because they...
But if it was just a little shorter.
Yeah, I mean, it was because they genuinely wanted people to carry families in their Ferrari. I think that's why they did it.
That's what the 400i was for.
But nobody bought the 400i.
I bought one.
And maybe we should talk about that.
Insert
That was a
picture.
mistake.
It was a POS.
But yeah, you're right. The car sits way too low. You can't drive over speed bumps. You got to be careful with like dips in the road and stuff like that. But you know, you drive around it.
Yeah, that's true.
It's not, you know, again, I've had this car 10 years. I have not ripped the bottom out of the car yet.
That's good.
So fun and interesting facts about this car. Ferrari did not have the engineering expertise to manufacture their own electric window mirror switches. So these are in fact borrowed from a 1980s BMW. It's the same switch you would find on something like a 320i. Moving to the inside, you have the Ferrari classic gauge font that was so typical of 1980s Ferraris, including the Testarossa, and it's a full gauge set. You have oil pressure and oil temperature and coolant temp. Speedo goes to 180. This bad boy redlines at 7,500 RPM, 76 if you're brave. It is a gated shifter Ferrari, and it is a dog-leg box. So first gear down and to the left, second, third, fourth, fifth, all the way back. And it's just awesome to row through the gears in this car. I've never once turned on the radio. I'm told it works. You can see it's a very period correct head unit with the cassette deck. Up here, this is something that previous Mondials did not have because again, they redesigned the entire interior for the T, you have this
Now he's going.
row of rocker switches, and the 3 here open up the different trunk lids for this car. It does have a front because it's mid-engine, engine, and then trunk behind that. That's your fuel door filler. And then you have this, it looks like a folder to like open your email. It's actually just a blank rocker switch. It does nothing. I'm not really sure why they included the font to go with it, but there it is. As I mentioned, you do have adjustable shocks in these, so that's your rocker button to control whether you want your shocks to be softer or firmer, depending on the road that you're on, and they really do work. And then in the center console, you have more buttons and switches. Ferrari, in their infinite wisdom, decided not to overwhelm you with climate controls and such in the center console. Here, they moved them back here, and you have your buttons to control whether you want AC on or off, and then the temperature can be dialed in via this adjustable knob here, and you have your tiny little temperature markings on there. And then the knob next to that controls the actual fan speed. So all of these do come quite easily to hand once you familiarize yourself with the location of them. You don't really need to look while you're driving. And you do have some additional buttons and switches here for fog lights, parking lights, electric door locks, electric antenna, and rear defroster. One of the things that I love about this car, again, is the fact that it's practical. And if we look in the rear seats of this car, they do fold down. You'd think after having owned this car for 10-something years, I'd know how to do it. This is giving me a little bit of trouble. There we go. So you can fold these down and they fold into a parcel shelf. Ferrari was thoughtful enough to include matching leather-colored luggage straps so that if you did in fact have contents laying on that shelf, they wouldn't shift around. And then of course, you do have a opening center rear console back here for more stowage space, along with vents that were specific for the rear passengers so they could have their own airflow back here. Again, very thoughtful of Ferrari. The headliner in these cars I love. I don't know if you can get a quick shot of that. It's like this corduroy kind of diagonal material. Again, very period 80s Ferrari. And passengers did have their own grab handles back here for when you were taking corners a little bit too quickly.
Well,
I find it hilarious that they chose to drill in the speakers and the doors into the leather. It just looks really, really kind of almost cheap, but that's what Ferrari did back in the day.
Mike, I better point out one more thing. Can you pop the trunk?
Yeah.
We've had literally 3 or 4 people asking us for a full in-depth tour of your Mondial T. So first of all, thank you so much for coming. This has just been riveting.
Oh, I can tell, Chris. You seem enchanted.
But one of my favorite parts about this car is this Ferrari toolkit, which, as you'll see, conveniently has all the tools you need if you get stuck on the road, including this 20-year-old timing belt, which is actually really easy to replace on this car, right?
Yeah, you just need to drop the motor out of the car on the side of the road, which anybody can do, and then you can replace the timing belt.
So if you blow up your timing belt on your Ferrari Mondial T, which has an interference engine, and aside from the valves and the interiors of the engine being completely destroyed, all you have to do is drop the entire engine on the side of the road, and then you can utilize these really helpful tools like these Ferrari pliers or this tow hook and just do what you need to do to get going again. So thanks, Ferrari.
Yeah, brilliant.
Yeah, really, I'm glad they they included this.
I mean, it still seems like this is very usable. I don't see any dry rotting or stress marks in
It's a
this.
place you want to save money on a vintage Ferrari. I mean, why would you buy a new timing belt when you could use one that's 10, 15, 20 years old?
Well, I think this is probably a little bit older than that, and it does say it's made in Italy by Pirelli.
Oh, that's a good thing.
So that gives me a lot of confidence that if my timing belt does break today, I could put that in this car.
So if you own a Ferrari Mondial T and you're looking to cut costs, just buy a used timing belt.
Look at how hilariously small the wheels are in this car.
I think they look good. It's got some real sidewall. It's usable.
So earlier versions had TRX wheels, which are those metric sized wheels that you can't get tires for anymore. This one, being the later version, has the 16-inch staggered wheel set. And yeah, I think you're right. It wears it well.
Well, I think the cool thing about this car is that you actually use it. We're going to go for a little ripper later on the PA tail of the Dragon.
Yeah.
I'm going to be a bit of a wuss and bring my new Spoon Civic instead of my Peugeot 205, but
Still have an opportunity to change your mind.
maybe you guilt trip me into it.
But
But I think this should shake up pretty well. I'm looking forward to it.